Here Tom and I have started gluing in the stringers, the wood stringer, the first one up top, just gluing it in with some epoxy, a very thin layer of epoxy, and then tied the upper stringer to the bottom stringer with some Velcro strips just to let that cure out. Whenever that cures out, then we will go ahead and glue in the side pieces. I was asked to give a little more information on the wing locking mechanism, so let's just start from wing lock 101, if you will. If we mount this piece here into the outboard panel of the wing, and we mount this piece here into the inboard panel, and then we bring them together by sliding this between the two pieces, line up some holes and stick a pin in it, now we have this pin locking both pieces of wood together. So we remove the pin and we can remove the part, or we can put the part back in, reinsert the pin, and then it's locked again. So the idea is we don't want to use a pin or a screw in this configuration because we can't get to it because this is all embedded in the wing. So what I did was I came up with a cam type lock, and if we look at the mock-up here, you can see that the piece here is acting like the pin that we were using to lock those two pieces of wood together, and we're using this part here to do the moving of the pin to open or close the locking mechanism. So I went on and redesigned it even more and made it so that when it's unlocked, this is going to stick down, and when it's locked, this is up close to being flush with the wing. Now this here will simulate the sheeting, so you're going to see a little bit of this hanging down, and whenever the wing is not locked, you're going to see a lot of it hanging down. So again, that's unlocked, that would be locked. Now the way this works is it travels on an arc, and the arc actually goes and into this notch that's cut in here, and you can see this here is going to go inside of here and it comes out on the other side. And if we look at the mechanism here, you can see that it's actually going through this piece and this piece. So basically what we're doing is we're having to pull this tongue out via bending that plastic, and that's not going to happen. And then that's actually PVC, so that makes it a really, really tight and really durable lock. And again, it just rotates up and down to lock. So it's tight enough that it's going to hold the wing, and it's loose enough that the lock actually will fall out. So also, whenever you go to lock it, you can push it on and then push it in, and if you push this up against the pin, then push it all the way in and it will lock. So that's how this locking mechanism works. Now this one I've already glued up and it's ready to mount. This one I have not glued up yet, so it will literally come apart. There's three main parts. This goes into the outer panel, and these two pieces here will actually glue into the inner wing panel. This is the left side, this here's the right side. And again, you unlock it and pull the panel off. You can push the panel back on, close it up, and then push the panel all the way in, and it will lock on its own. So, and again, to make sure it's locked, you just take a look underneath the wing at the leading edge, and you shouldn't see any more than that much of the arm sticking down. If you see that much of the arm sticking down, then you know the wing is not locked. So I hope that covers any details I might have missed in the earlier video on the wing locking mechanism. One other thing about these pieces, the way I went about getting these angles, for example in the tongue or in the receiving piece, was to make a fixture. And I'm not going to show you how I cut it or while it was being cut, but I'll tell you how I did it. First off, I cut a 2x4 square, and then I figured out what the angle needed to be for my part, so that whenever the tongue came in, this has to be the same angle as
the wing tube and any other tubes that are lining up whenever the wing comes together. So this has to be at that angle, because all these tubes have to be parallel. So I figured out what the angle is, and then I cut a 2x4 square on the bottom, and then I put that angle in it. So now this angle is the same as the notch. So now if I take out this tongue and I lay the tongue on the top here, notice that the angle that is in this tongue happens to be the same angle that I cut my 2x. So if you can imagine the router bit plunging down, the router bit is on my milling machine and it's vertical, and because this is on the angle, then I'm just going to hold the wood and then have the router bit come down and make the cut into the wood. The same thing with these plates here. These plates get the angle cut because if you recall, these pieces slid in on an angle, and that, again, that angle, you can see it right there, is the same. Now my bit would be standing straight up, which is what's going to happen. So in order to get those pieces cut and cut very tight, as you can see, there's absolutely no gap in any of these pieces where they come together, and it's because I set these in a fixture just like this. This was a second one that I made just as a backup. You put the pieces on, you have to make a right and a left, because if you look at these, one goes in one direction, one in the other. So making a right and a left, then you have the bit come down and make the cut in both of them. Now, whenever you cut these, you're going to stack all three pieces. In other words, you're going to put this piece in, this piece, and this piece for one of them, which would be, actually to put this together the right way would be like this, and then this piece here goes over the top of it. So we have this piece here would go down, and then you would reverse it on the other side, and then of course have the bit come in and mark or cut out the parts, but the main thing is they're on the right angle. So again, with this fixture, I was able to cut both the left and the right of the main piece, and then also the tongue. Now whenever I cut the tongue, I actually took the tongue and the pieces and put it all together. So in other words, whenever this went together, I did it like this. So whenever I cut it, the tongue is actually set on here, and this all together, and this tongue is actually cut at one shot. So this piece goes in, the bit comes down and cuts out the groove, and then to cut the other one, you actually flip this around, because again, you need a left and a right. So again, it comes in and cuts this out. Now on the fixture that I used to cut the tongue, it was actually standing straight up instead of going across like this. This piece here is just on there so that I have a square edge to rest these parts on whenever they get cut. And I'll show you some pictures of the fixtures, the actual fixtures that I used, and you'll see the grooves in the fixtures where I cut the parts. At this point, I have the right side and the left side marked in the wing. So now I'm going to cut out this area here on both of them, as well as the trough, and the trough is going to be in the top. I will cut from the top down. Now one thing to keep in mind, the bottom of this trough here needs to be on the same plane that the bottom of my wing tube pocket is, because again, these things have to be parallel. All the tubes have to be parallel to one another. So because of the taper that's in this wing, and you can see that it actually gets thicker the closer it goes to the center, so I have to compensate for the amount of thickness. And because if I just cut this straight across at this depth, then the receiver is actually going to be setting in here like that instead of level. And again, it needs to set level with the bottom of the wing tube pocket. And you can see there, it's down about almost 3/16 of an inch lower here than it is there. So I'm going to be almost 1/8 of an inch at an angle. And that I can cut that pretty easily using the CNC machine. Here you can see I have the inner wing panels actually set on the machine. I have this side over here elevated, which this is the joint, this being the center. It is setting down on the material. This one here is elevated so that I wind up parallel with the groove that I have in there for the wing tube. And what I did was cut a block and then move the machine over on each end and got this depth the same so that the bit rides straight over, and that way I shimmed this up and down until I got the same gap between the bit and the wood without raising or lowering the Z-axis. So now if I jog this over, this is the same depth. So what I'll do now is go ahead and code this, and I'm just going to write it by hand, to eat out this portion here, and then to eat out this portion here, and the same thing on this side. I'm going to eat out all of this as well as eat out this section here. Now the only thing is, this piece here, all of this is going to be eaten out all the way through. This one here, however, is going to have a floor in it that'll look something similar to the floor for the wing tube. And so what I have to do is measure the bottom up to this edge, and then I will come up, and that will be the final bottom of that pocket. And then this will actually set right down in the pocket that will be made. And again, there is a left and a right. So as you can see, I'm using weight to hold the two panels down. I have them taped together, and they're both on the same plane here. So I should be able to cut these, and again, I'll be handwriting the code, so it's going to take a little time to do that, but the results will be a perfect fit to the material that I'm trying to glue in place. So it's worth the effort. This here will give you an idea of what we're cutting. This is the pocket on the left side. This is the pocket on the right side. So let's begin. First, we should be cutting out this part right here first. And the bit should drop. Drop final time. Now I should eat out the center section here. Just cut it right on the line. these pieces here got cut back on the angle. So now the end cap will contact both the foam as well as the ends of the receiver plate. And here's a look at the receiver plate on the right side. So you can see it's contacts the end cap will contact both the foam and the ends of the plate here once it's glued in place. Now you can see I've gone ahead and marked the left and the right tip panel for the tongue. So now I'll go to the CNC machine and write a little code, and I will notch these out just like I did the receiver. Okay, now I've got my material set up, and we're going to go ahead and cut the tongue pocket. Here I've got the right wing panel, and I'm going to insert the tongue, and then this is just a piece of the tubing that'll be the joiner. And to test this fit, we slide this right in. You can see that the seam, the joint, the tongue, the left wing is the same way. You can see I've test fit the tongue. Again, it just simply lays in here, and then whenever this wing comes together, the tongue lines up, you would lock it in place, and that would complete the install of the wing tip, the outer wing panel.